to reconsider a lot of the mythos that has been taught to them for the past 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, especially in the West, and how Christianity in particular is supposed to be deployed with respect to how one treats one's neighbor in the context of social matters, political matters, ecclesiastical matters, what have you. Let me put this another way for you. Many of the things that Christians have been browbeaten into accepting as part and parcel of the Christian ethic, as a matter of fact, diametrically opposes the Christian ethic, and it is used to weaponize Christianity against itself, making, in essence, the faith once and for all given to the saints as nothing more than a suicide pact. I'll explain more shortly in this live stream of Irrespective, giving you various examples of what that means and give you a vivid illustration of why these explanations over how we are supposed to view the world and view others and certain ideas of how we treat others are merely reprobations, yes, abominations and misinterpretations of what it actually means to be a Christian. More on that shortly, but first and foremost, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this new live stream episode of Irrespective. For those of you that might be joining us for the first time, my name is Gio. If you are a subscriber and watch these live streams frequently, welcome back. Some housekeeping items before we continue. If you'd like to interact with me in the chat, please do so, whether you're watching this on Rumble, X, or YouTube. I have access to that on my laptop to all of those chats, comments, questions, place them in the chat if you'd like to interact with me. Also, do not forget, if you have not yet subscribed, Rumble, YouTube, X, please do so now. If you're on Rumble, if you are on X, if you are on YouTube, please remember to click that like button. It's one of the best ways to have the algorithms understand if that's a misnomer or not. Time will tell, especially with respect to all these people whom are saying that AI will become sentient in the not too distant future. The algorithms like organic content, and organically people liking organically content, and then they'll begin to, the algorithms will begin to suggest that to others. So if you want to help us spread the word of Irrespective, smash that thumbs up button, the like button on X also. Don't forget to share our content, and also if you are on YouTube or Rumble, hit that notification bell to be alerted as to when we go live next, which is every Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to donate also. It helps us to continue to keep the lights on here in Irrespective and to tell the truth irrespective of whoever wants to hear it or not. There's a QR code in the upper left-hand corner of the screen that you can scan. Conversely, there is a link available to you in the description box underneath the video player. And last but not least, do not forget to follow us on the socials. On X, our username is @irrespective77. And on TikTok, you can find us under the username @theirrespective. Now, there was a couple of clips that I came across online on my personal X account, which brings to light what I'd like to talk to the audience about today. There are quite a few myths that American Christians in particular have come to believe about how Christianity teaches that we must deploy ourselves, for lack of a better phrase, in the world. But the thing is that the way that we've been taught these things necessarily contradicts Christian ethics themselves. So if the Christian ethic, at least according to what we've been taught, necessarily contradicts itself, can we actually call that the Christian ethic? Or is it that in and of itself is proof that what we are being taught is errant? It contradicts what the Bible has to teach, more specifically what Christianity has to teach on the matter. I'll give you a couple of examples so that you can begin to understand what my angle is in all of this. And I understand that this is mostly a philosophical examination of these things, but you need to delve into the understanding of what is at the spirit of these arguments to see what their essence is and then to make a determination as to whether or not they align with Christian principles or not. And that's why we delve into these things. There are persons that when you ask them to go down certain rabbit holes, they just refuse to go down them because they refuse to use the gray matter. But as I have advocated for on these episodes repeatedly, Christians should not be a party to, participants of, the thought process that pervades the secular world wherein people refuse to think for themselves. As a matter of fact, it is a biblical commandment to examine all things. So any Christian that decides to follow the secularist trend of, in essence, the idea that says ignorance is bliss, you're actually committing a sin. You're engaging in unchristian behavior. The Bible calls you, it commands you explicitly to judge with righteous judgment. But if you can't judge righteously, if you can't examine righteously because you choose not to think upon things, then what are you doing in the first place? Why are you even making determinations to begin with? Hence, this leads me to the general point. Think about the ideas that Christians have subscribed to that generally contradict Christian principles, although we think that we are somehow behaving in a Christian manner according to what we've been taught, when in fact it's actually a perversion of what Christianity teaches. Let's talk about one of these buzzwords that begins to illustrate what I'm attempting to communicate here: tolerance. For many years, churches have preached the so-called virtue of tolerance as being a Christian virtue. And I know that some of you would immediately reach for some verses in the King James Version of the Bible and will say, look, it actually says here that we must be temperate. Well, let me tell you something. Temperance is one thing. Tolerance is another. Look up the definition of both of those words and you'll note that there is no bridge that ties one with the other. But back to the point. Tolerance has been preached to Christians from the pulpit and without the pulpit as being a Christian virtue. But then you have to ask yourself, what is it that Christians are demanded to tolerate? In the name of toleration, Christians have actually sat back and allowed a culture that was created by them and for them, talking about the United States and other nations in Europe, to have our lands invaded by foreigners whom actually detest Christianity and want to stamp it out from any public displays of the aforesaid. Furthermore, they have filled our lands with people whom impudently and arrogantly flaunt their deviancy in many different shapes and forms. I have a couple of examples here to prove the aforesaid. It's talking about these clips that I had encountered online, which leads me to talk about this very thing. So under the name of so-called demonstrating Christian charity, what we have actually done is we've become a party of enablement. We've become the group that enables the behavior which we are actually not supposed to tolerate in the first place. These examples that I am going to lead off this edition with prove what I've just said, the inherent ridiculousness of what we are profiling in this edition. These clips come to us from Dallas, Fort Worth. Yes, Dallas, Fort Worth. This first clip that I'm about to play for the audience comes to us from an account from a woman by the name of Sarah Fields. The account name is Sarah is Censored. This is on X. According to what she posts, tagged alongside this video on X, she writes, exclusive, Fort Worth, Texas, on June 27th, 2026 at Trinity Pride Fest in Fort Worth, Texas, street preachers Richard Penkoski and David Grisham were subjected to multiple violations of their First Amendment rights while attempting to preach on public property. Upon arrival, they were immediately met by Fort Worth police officers who blocked their access to the public street and sidewalk, threatening both men with arrest for trespassing if they entered the area. When Grisham reminded officers that he had previously sued the city of Fort Worth in 2014 over this exact issue, a lawsuit that resulted in a settlement and an official apology from the city, the officer dismissed the prior case, stating, quote, "I don't care. You can file whatever lawsuit you want," end quote. After being forced outside the barricades, the confrontation escalated as multiple officers allegedly threatened to cite the men based on the subjective reaction of attendees. A female officer stated they would be cited if they said anything offensive. When Penkovsky responded that offensive speech is protected under the Constitution and is not a crime, the officer claimed it fell under disorderly conduct, stating, quote, "Well, yes, that is the conduct," end quote. Another officer further confirmed the citations would be based solely on whether others were offended. When Penkovsky asked whether calling a biological male a male would result in a citation if someone took offense, the officer responded that if he continued doing so and someone found it offensive, he would be cited. Penkovsky also pointed out that he was deeply offended by half-naked men walking around children at the event, but the officer dismissed the complaint, responding, quote, "There's really not much I can do about that," end quote. During the encounter, Penkovsky pulled up and directly showed an officer. An officer established U.S. Supreme Court precedent confirming that the government cannot prohibit citizens from accessing traditional public forums such as streets and sidewalks simply because a private group holds a permit. Although the officer acknowledged the information by responding, "Huh." Interesting that this is a public servant, as they call themselves. That's the biggest euphemism if I've ever heard one. He continued enforcing the restriction. As officers repeatedly pushed the preachers farther away from the event, David Grisham was ultimately issued a citation for unreasonable noise. Unreasonable noise. One has to ask the question, what's the difference between reasonable and unreasonable noise? Is a reasonable noise is when someone is making a cogent argument, and an unreasonable noise is someone just maybe screaming like the gathering man before Jesus cast out those demons? One has to ask the question. When asked to explain what constitutional, cops invent all the time. They invent statutes and codes that don't exist just to justify their illicit activities whilst wearing the badge. It happens all the time. And even my posture on the matter, I've gotten criticized over and over by Back to Blue Christians everywhere saying, how is it possible that a man like you were to preach out of Romans 13 and you have issues with backing police officers? You're telling me that Romans 13 allows officials to violate the very laws that they have sworn to uphold? You're telling me that Romans 13 somehow prohibits Christians from noting public corruption, political corruption, official corruption? Somehow that's written there in Romans 13. Somehow Romans 13 tells Christians that we ought to discount human nature from participating when it wears a badge. That is simply outright stupid and ignorant. And if you're a person that subscribes to these silly ideas, hence why I'm profiling all of this in this edition of the live stream, boy, oh boy, you are really naive. And you wish to be naive, and you are actually committing a sin, as I explained at the very beginning of this live stream episode, because it runs contrary that the Bible were to warn you about human nature, and suddenly there is this magical process that happens that when a person dons a government uniform, human nature, sinful human nature, suddenly suspended, and that person becomes the Archangel Michael, incapable almost of committing atrocities, violations of people's rights, incapable of corruption, etc. You have to be foolish to think that way. But unfortunately, there's a lot of men and women, children living amongst us, even though they are past the age of 40. As officers repeatedly pushed the preachers farther away from the event, David, if what I'm trying to communicate here, isn't it evidence enough of the aforesaid? Look at the things that these police officers are doing to, in essence, protect and give comfort to people whom are sexualizing children. And they are criminalizing people who are there trying to, first and foremost, preach the gospel, and secondly, call out the reprobates for what they're doing, what the officials should be doing. And yet here are government officials protecting reprobate acts and criminalizing Christians for calling it out. And yet I'm the problem for calling out when officials engage in corrupt acts, because Romans 13 or something, some misinterpretation of Romans 13. I hope this example is beginning to illustrate everything I'm saying, because think about it. Christians, and I've seen the comments thread on these videos, Christians were saying, but these Christians aren't showing any tolerance. Christians are supposed to tolerate men walking naked, even though they have a government permit, as if that makes it okay. Suddenly, in God's eyes, the sin of walking around naked to cause lasciviousness, especially amongst children, the very act that Jesus says that it's better for these people to tie a millstone around their neck and toss themselves into the sea because they make children stumble, that all of a sudden God doesn't see a problem with it because they bought a government permit. And Christians are supposed to tolerate that. And I've seen the comments, as I said before. But what about tolerance? So you're saying that, in essence, don't say anything when the sin is being displayed. You see, anybody that thinks that way would have probably been amongst the first who would have questioned Jesus and would have said, how dare you, when he cast out the money changers from the temple for them making merchandise in God's house. This is the sort of twisted way where Christians have, as I said before, allowed Christianity to be weaponized against itself. But since Christians, the vast majority of Christians in the West, can't be bothered to think these things through so that they won't fall into the trap of contradiction wherein you allow people who hate Christianity to weaponize Christianity against itself, this is where we're at. I have to explain these things, and others like me, a small minority, by the way, we have to explain away these things to demonstrate to people how they've been duped. When the officers were asked how they justified suppressing the constitutional rights of Christians and veterans in a country that was founded by Christians and for Christians, by the way, who fought for the country, they offered no meaningful, objective explanation. I've said it before. When you look at other things pertaining to the realities of these people who put on a badge, they're ultimately going to serve whomever their paymasters are. That's just the way that it is. So it doesn't matter how unconstitutional, how many rights they violate. They don't care. We're talking about road pirates for hire. These are ruffians with a badge on that they will do whatever their overlords in the government will tell them to do because they are not public servants, contrary to the myth that we've come to believe about these people. They are guns for hire to enforce whatever the state dictates. And in many instances, they'll simply impose it based on their own ideological inclination. What do I mean by this? What makes you think that these officers that are obviously violating the law and violating the rights of American Christians here aren't doing these things because they approve of what's happening in that sodomite pride parade in Fort Worth, and they're just trying to silence the voice of Christians? Here's the video.
It's pretty loud. So we can use it up to 80
ordinance
decibels.
means like music, not talking. If someone is offended by your talking, then we have a problem.
That
That's what I
is a
just
constitutional violation of our law.
Boy, I have to pause here because this is where we've gotten. This is how effeminate our country has become. If someone considers something that you say is offensive, now you can be cited. How effeminate have we become as a nation, where we are allowing people whom are overly sensitive to criminalize others? And let me say this, when I mean overly sensitive, we're actually talking about people that wish not to hear the truth. That's all that is. Let's not call it what it isn't. Let's not use euphemisms to describe what is happening here. You've got law enforcement, you've got governments now trying to criminalize Christianity because they don't want to hear the truth that their activities are ungodly. And when you have Christian men and women calling these things out for what they are, and now the government turns against them, what you have here is government, in essence, taking the side against the truth. But a lot of Christians don't see this because what they've been catechized in is niceness. Remember, the ultimate calling for Christians is not to be like Jesus, is to be liked by sinners. That's the ultimate calling.
No, if they are offended by your speech, okay, then I'll write you this ticket and then we'll go from there.
Wait, you're going to take her
And then it's also an aberration to me that this is a woman police officer, obviously an overweight woman, a fat woman, but the fact that this is law enforcement. Why would you want a woman to be a police officer? That's number one. And anybody that gets offended by that, you have no right. First and foremost, you're not in the right to get offended over it. Number two, it actually tells me that you're more catechized more by secularism than you are by Christianity. The Bible talks to us about the weaker vessel that the woman is, and that she needs to be protected by men, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, by her husband, so on, so on and so forth. And you see the hierarchy. You see how God created, how Christ created the created order, and you're actually in favor of this stuff. You're the person that has the problem with what Christianity teaches. It's not that Christianity is a problem. You're in essence saying that you have a problem with what Christianity teaches. So then why do you call yourself a Christian? Well, Gio, but people are going to see me. You see, that's the problem. Christians have been catechized. They've been taught. They've allowed themselves to be taken to a place where they think, first and foremost, the highest calling is for sinners not to dislike me. It's pathetic.
Speech?
Yes, absolutely.
Are you serious? Speech. You're going to cite us for...
So here is basically what it tantamounts to be an HR manager putting a badge on her and then trying to silence people. This is why I said what's going to be required in order for our society to be fixed is for men to tell these people to go back to where they need to go. That's the only thing that's going to fix this. Once the patriarchy reestablishes itself and reasserts its proper place where it should be in the hierarchical position that God had established for men, then these sorts of lunacies and these sorts of ridiculous violations will simply see, or they'll be greatly diminished. I was going to say will cease, but in many instances they'll be greatly diminished because injustice is just a part. It's going to be a part of the human experience because man is essentially fallen. But you can greatly reduce its impact if there are more just people controlling things, if there are more just people administering things. That's a fact.
It's called disorderly conduct.
Disorderly conduct. You can easily see that this woman was the typical teacher's pet, the one that would bring the apple to the teacher because she wanted to be the most liked student in class. And now that she has a badge, she thinks that she has this authority to tell these guys what they can and cannot do. I wouldn't doubt if she herself is a lesbian. I wouldn't doubt if she herself is probably a sodomite, and therefore she's abusing her authority here to try to silence these Christian men.
It has to be accompanied by conduct.
This is the conduct
I'm
that
a
you're
retired
doing.
police officer myself.
For who?
26 years, federal law enforcement.
So it's federal. So this has nothing to do with local.
Oh
Wow.
boy. Oh boy. It has nothing to do with local. Has she ever heard of a concept called preemption? Has she ever heard of a legal concept, and she is a police officer, by the way, of preemption, federal preemption? Oh boy.
Yeah. Well,
Do whatever you think that you can do.
And you can tell she's threatening them because she has the gun in her holster. At the end of the day, these things are enforced by the end of a barrel. That's why they don't care. They don't care if they're violating people's rights because, especially when you're talking about a situation that police officers in this country are given qualified immunity, they can violate the laws with impunity. They can even kill people. And at the end of the day, the police benevolent association and their unions and whatnot are going to protect them at all costs, even though they violated the laws. And they do things that otherwise the average person would be criminalized and prosecuted for, and they get away with it. They don't care. They know that the system is inherently on their side because since they are there to protect the state's interests, the state is going there, therefore, to protect them. Where's the justice in that? Doesn't that essentially violate Christian ethics when you, in essence, criminalize the innocent and you justify the evil person? I thought that was a violation of Christian ethics, but evidently those that back the blue don't see it that way.
Wow. It says 80 decibels.
Since y'all know the law so well, I'm not going to let y'all do
It's
it.
interesting. So they know the law better than she does, and how does she respond instead of saying, you're right, I apologize. I, being a law enforcement officer, should know this. No, she goes on and mocks these people who know the law.
I just want to clarify, if anything is said that's offensive, you're going to write a ticket?
If someone complains that your language or what you're saying
Hurting
is
someone's
offensive,
feelings. But you see, folks, this is my point. This is where modern Christianity has gotten us. You just hurt someone's feelings, and you can't hurt someone's feelings. It would be illegal. This is another clip from a similar event, and this was covered by another account on X by a guy by the name of Carlos Turcios. Listen to this exchange.
But no, I want to ask, and I'm being dead serious. So if a biological male comes up to me who says he's a woman, and I call him, I say, sir, and he gets offended, is that a citable offense? If I call a biological male a male, and he says I'm offended, I'm gonna whatever. Is that a citable offense if he's offended by that speech?
Man, we're talking gray area right now. When I talked about earlier when it says that's a vague.
You know what's even more pathetic about this? This is a man. And this is a man whom is cowering under the system created by feminists, in essence. That's a gray area, man. Bro, stop being such a wuss. Stop being such a wuss. Really? Such a gray area, man. I keep saying it. People sometimes refuse to, they'd rather accept their naivete, the things that the naivete teaches. They'd rather accept the premises of that, which is all based on falsehoods, than the reality that's smacking them in the face. If I say something offensive to someone, that gives the cops the right, the state the right to lock me up?
Conversation,
especially here when we're talking about preaching Christian truth. I thought we Christians were against this sort of tyranny.
I'm genuinely.
But we have to tolerate it, because remember, toleration is a Christian virtue. Does God tolerate sin? Interesting.
I don't believe I would cite that for offensive language. Offensive language to me is calling somebody
N-word,
curse words.
We don't curse.
Oh, so again, let's say I do use those terms. By law, can the police arrest me? Of course not. But here, this wuss is actually saying that he could cite someone and arrest somebody for that. Are you kidding me?
No, I agree. But it's more like you call somebody a male, I don't necessarily find that offensive unless they come up.
You don't, but what if they do?
That's what I'm saying. If they come up and say, hey, I'm offended by that, and you continue to do that, well, then that's just.
This has become allowable in a once formerly great Christian nation because, remember, under the doctrine of niceness, which we know is written somewhere in 3 Corinthians, and it has been advanced by many Christian churches for many decades now, in the United States, you can't be seen as offensive. So therefore, it's best that we criminalize that which is seen as offensive, which, as I said earlier, remember, is nothing more than telling the truth. And those that wish for you to not tell the truth and want to silence you, therefore, they appeal to the legal system in order to illegalize truth-telling, which is what Christians are called to explicitly state and preach and live by. Do you see? I hope these examples I'm giving you prove everything I'm trying to prove. Christianity weaponized against itself. What moral nation, what morally sound nation allows a group of sodomite adults to exhibit their parts to children on the street corners? What nation allows that? What good nation, moral nation allows that? But we just got to put up with it, because Christ tells us to love the sinner, man. Christ tells you to love the sinner by allowing a guy to sexualize your children. That sounds to me more the words of a coward that is trying to justify his cowardice and then misinterpreting Christianity in an attempt, a failed attempt, to try to think or make others think that Christianity somehow gives you cover for that cowardice.
And here's the catch.
So it's the, hey, warning, I'm feeling offended by that. Then we're moving.
We were a nation, man. We were a nation where people like George Whitefield and others were standing on court steps and preaching hellfire and brimstone. And people would gather to hear these people talk. And people were coming to saving faith in Jesus Christ. Benjamin Franklin, it is a known thing, one of the founders of the nation, was actually giving money to George Whitefield and others so that they would preach the gospel, even though Franklin himself was a deist. But he recognized the inherent good of Christianity, and he actually bankrolled street preaching in the country. Look it up, and you'll see that I'm not making this up. We went from that, Christians going to street corners to preach the good news and telling people they were going to die in their sins unless they repented, to You're offending the sodomite. Be quiet, lest I take you to jail. Under the guise of, guys, we got to love everybody. You don't want to offend the sinners. Remember, you don't want to be disliked.
So what if I'm offended by what they say? Like they come up telling me this and then the other, swearing at me. Will they get cited?
What's
Are
good
you
for the
offended
goose?
by it?
I'm offended by all of this.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
I'm offended by seeing half-naked men running around with children. I am deeply offended by that.
Correct. Unfortunately, there's not much on our.
Oh, you see the two-tier justice system makes an appearance again. So Christians don't have a right to get offended and then criminalize their offense against those whom are offending them. But those whom are against Christian principles can under our current system of government. See how that works? See how Christian toleration, so-called, got us to this point? To the point where in a Christian nation, in a formerly Christian nation, this is what we have allowed under the guise of we just have to have permissiveness. We have to have tolerance. We have to have love. This is where it has gotten us. What does that also say for us as a people that we have actually allowed this sort of chicanery to happen? Because this could have been stopped a long time ago. This could have been impeded a long time ago. But Christians put down their swords, they put down their shields, they put down their bucklers, they put down their uniforms, and they said, it's a Christian nation, we're good. We don't have to fight for this. It's baked in. Christianity weaponized against itself to the point where now in churches across America, the gospel of toleration of sin is what passes off as the gospel and not the gospel itself. You know, I think it's important that just like in Israel's history, when the prophets were called by God to speak the blatant, unvarnished truth about Israel, its harlotry, its spiritual adultery, its idolatry, its murderous ways. I mean, Jesus, in his time in ministering, he basically called the Israelis murderers. You honor your fathers whom killed the prophets. And how did they respond? By killing the King of Kings. You bring that up nowadays, and Christians will tell you, why are you such an anti-Semite? Just to give you another example of how Christianity is weaponized against itself. So, Gio, what do we do with this sort of situation? Well, I think the first thing you need to do is to be familiar with what the text actually has to teach and to not be ashamed of it. It's one of the most popular passages that Christians quote often, but doesn't seem to be any vivid way of them actually living it. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That would be a good start. Number two is to speak the truth and to live it boldly, to not be ashamed of the matter. It doesn't matter if you think people are going to be offended by it or if they say they're offended by it. Just speak the truth boldly and be not ashamed of it. And if it costs you something, then guess what? The cost is worth it. But if anybody responds to that very declaration that I have just made with the but, you know where that is coming from. That's inherently coming from a place of fear. And any justification to try to justify that fear, then you know that you're running into a problem, essentially. And the third thing that you have to do is to examine all the areas where you or any other Christian has adopted ideas that are inherently secularist in nature, and to correct that thought process and go back to a place where you reaffirm and reassert what the Bible has to say on the matter, what Christianity teaches on the matter. Yesterday, based on the latest abomination of the SCOTUS decision, where practically they said that any person born here, even to illegal immigrants and others, is an automatic American citizen. Boy, oh boy, that's a problem. By the way, which, side note here, even Pew Research had to admit that this is very rare in the world. We're one of the very few nations that actually has that. No nation in Europe, from what I could tell, actually even has that rule in place. We are one of the few nations in the world that actually allows that to happen. It's pathetic. But if we are supposedly a nation by the people and for the people, as we are constantly told in all the propaganda that we're fed continuously, why is it that these Supreme Court justices, the majority of them women, by the way, and there's something to be said about that, Isaiah 3:12, like I posted yesterday on Telegram and my ex account, and there were people that rebuffed me on that. How can you be such a sexist? And here I am quoting scripture, looking at the past, where God says that, in essence, it was a curse against Israel, that children were the oppressors and women were the rulers of Israel, turning the nation against the right paths. Isaiah 3:12, read it. I'm quoting scripture, and I'm demonstrating a modern day example, because Amy Coney Barrett, one of Trump's picks for the Supreme Court, actually sided with the liberal women in the court, aside from Justice Roberts, to hand down this abomination of a ruling. I'm quoting scripture, and I've got Christians telling me that I'm a sexist and I'm a pig, and I'm thinking, have they not read what the text has to say about this? It tells me that they're actually more secularist than anything else. Just to prove another point, just to demonstrate again how Christianity is weaponized against itself. These people are actually more secularist, they're more sinners than they are Christians, in thought and in deed. I go back, and I'm going to end this live stream with something I said previously, and I'm going to quote it again. The attitude that we Christians need to have in order to begin to fight back against this, even if the rest of the nation destroys itself by continuing down the path of secularism, including Christians that, or self-avowed Christians that actually embrace secularism instead of Christianity proper. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Choose ye this day who you will serve, as Joshua said. But as for me and my house, the decision here is we will serve the Lord. It's that simple. It's certainly sad to see that Christians have allowed this to happen, but there is hope. And the hope is that you yourself, dear listener, can make a choice for you to personally not go down the path that the rest have. There's an old saying that our parents used to teach us, and it's still a very good saying, by the way. If the rest of the world were to jump off a bridge, would you follow them? Stated succinctly, but you get the idea. It's a good principle to live by, and one that actually Christianity proper teaches. That wide path that Jesus talked about, it's wide, and a lot of people take it, but it leads to perdition. But that narrow path, it's difficult, but it's the one that leads to life. The choice is yours. That's the comment that I have for this edition of the Irrespective live stream. I hope that you'll join me again on Sunday for the next live stream. That'll be at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's in the spirit of what I've talked about today, but I'd like to examine a particular interaction that Jesus has with the woman at the well. Because that interaction tells us a lot. We do a deep dive on her reaction in particular. And there's a lot to be said about how she didn't react and the acceptance of truth. That's what we're going to talk about on Sunday, and I hope that you'll join me on Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, for the next edition of Irrespective. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, click the thumbs up, and share our content with others, please. Also, don't forget to donate. It helps us to continue to keep the lights on here on Irrespective. The QR code is on the screen, as you can see. There's also a link in the description box beneath the video player that you can click on or tap on, depending on the device you are using to watch this transmission. And last but not least, do not forget to follow us on the socials. We are on X. Irrespective77 is the username there. And on TikTok, The Irrespective is the username on TikTok. That's all the time I have left for this edition. Thank you for watching. And until the next occasion that we gather, I wish you adieu and Godspeed.